What's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here with another episode of the Smart Agency Masterclass, a podcast for you, the digital agency owner that wants to grow faster and create the freedom to basically pick and choose to do the stuff that you really want. And on today's episode, I have some old friends and members of our mastermind on, where they're going to talk about the 4 to 5 pivotal things that they did in their agency to really get over the multi-million-dollar mark. And I'm really happy with what they've done. So let's go ahead and jump to the show. Jason Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, thanks for having us.
I had a little internet issue, so we're doing this a little bit different over Zoom. So hopefully everything holds out. But Jason Ryan, tell us who you are and what do you guys do?
Sure. My name is Chase Williams. I'm co-founder of Mark on My Market. We're a digital agency. We focus on law firms, storage, and now we're branching out into franchises now. And then I'll pass off to Ryan to talk about a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Our approach is mostly the organic digital space. So a lot of SEO, content marketing, web design, moved into some interesting projects like conversion rate optimization, leveraging the traffic that already exists on the website and making sure it turns into qualified leads. And I think that one of the ways that we've maybe separated ourselves over the years is not really taking that package approach. We're very consultative, strategic. We like putting together, consistent quarterly plans that really focus on opportunities and gaps and really keeping it unique. Not really anything, I guess you could say, cookie cutter going on. So it's been good building long-term relationships.
I love it. And how did you guys start the agency?
It's a pretty cool story. Ryan was working full-time at a law firm. I was working at a digital agency in New York, and we're grinding 9 to 5, and then randomly people would come up to us, like family, friends, and just people you meet and say, hey, do you know how to build a website? And in the back of my head, I'm like, no, I don't know, but I could use the extra money and this is great. And so it kind of just snowballed from there. And we got to the point where we were just working 90-hour weeks and took the jump and said, hey, we got to quit our full-time jobs and focus on this. So Ryan was down in Florida and I was in New York, and we basically bootstrapped the company, started it in our basement in Brooklyn, and then scaled. And now we're, I think, how many employees we have, Ryan, at this point?
Just got to 36.
Yeah, 36 cool. Employees. So, and the first pivotal moment we can talk about is, where we saw the biggest change when we hired you. We were fortunate enough to grab you while you were still doing the one-on-one consultations.
Well, what was the first thing that we really started focusing on?
I think it was niching down into legal, because we had that, I think about 60 to 70% of our clients were legal, and we were basically just anything in the kitchen sink we would take on. And then projects as well. It was just like, hey, you want us to design this, graphic? All right, cool. But it was really focusing on SEO and then focusing specifically on legal and just building processes around helping law firms that we could then replicate across other areas. Now that we're at a point where we have this proven system that works. Now we can go to our salespeople and say, hey, all right, we're going to go after storage facilities or moving, or now we're going into franchises. So we have this proven system that we're adapting, and kind of took out of your playbook some things that, really helped us scale.
How long was it for you guys running the agency before you brought on salespeople?
That's a good question. I guess it's the difference between someone that was actually a salesperson or someone that shouldn't have been a salesperson who was trying to sell for us, because we actually had a quote salesperson like probably day one. And that's a funny story, and that was a mistake, because we know anyone listening how difficult it is to find not only like a good salesperson, but someone that's going to stick with you and not make insane demands after a while. So I think like the first good salesperson we had was someone that was very charismatic, outgoing, that didn't know much to start, but was committed and really put in the effort, and really had to work alongside them, younger guy, for about 6 months before he really started to pick up some momentum. And then sure enough left and then did sales for another company after all that mentoring, all that hard work. But yeah, a couple of years in, when we got the first one that was actually doing pitches, having conversations, upsells, doing all the closing themselves without like our involvement. And it should have been sooner, but it's a tricky conversation, as you imagine.
What did you learn from the first couple hires in the sales? Because this is one of the most common things, right? It's like the owners are selling because we know the process. We know where the company's going. We can actually be a solution. Like we're selling the solution rather than selling marketing, right? We're selling a solution to a problem. So what failed with the first couple hires?
I'll kind of speak on this a bit. I think we were just kind of seeing, what worked and what didn't work, and kind of understanding that no one's going to kind of pitch the product as best that you can. So there's a gap there. And then at the same time, maybe being like a little bit too greedy on like what you're offering our salespeople. So I think we really struck gold when we basically poached somebody, paid them way more than, our salespeople make more than we make. So we kind of figured out a strategy where, hey, we're going to find the best salesperson and pay them a ton of money and make sure they never leave us. Because like Ryan mentioned, we put a ton of time into training these young kids that they're super hungry. They're sitting there watching all these YouTube videos about like, you get on the rabbit hole of, I want to go there, but
It's good you don't know their names.
Yeah. I don't know their names because I see it and I just X it out and I block it. But yeah, so it's just I think the things that kind of led to success is having like a really aggressive commission structure, paying a decent base, and then like almost having a piece of what they're selling. So like one thing that we do is like if somebody signs a recurring client for us, they get a piece of that recurring client as long as they're a client. And then they're in charge of upselling. So there's a huge opportunity there for them to help us increase the revenue on that part. So it kind of gives them more skin in the game than just saying like, hey, anything you sell, you get the first 3 months. And then, because after that, people don't really care. But once they get a book of business and they think, hey, I'm making like 6 figures plus, I'm not ever going to want to leave because then I have to start all over again.
Yeah, they get that golden handcuffs, right? It's, but yeah, once you find a really good salesperson and, it's so tough to hold on to them. And it's, you actually worry about losing them. Let's talk about what's the second pivotal thing that you guys did that made a really big, like when you're thinking about, scaling the agency, what was the second?
I think it goes hand in hand with sales, and it was like our proposal and the pitch. And going back to when we originally started talking, you look at like the proposal as like a document, just like an agreement or contract, but the proposal is like the driving tool of like documenting everything that you're going to do and like reassuring them that they made the right decision and like everything that we're going to be providing makes sense to them in a clear way. And so we spent a lot of time positioning the proposal. At the end of the day, it is a contract, but it's almost like telling like a narrative or a story too. It's like walking through it and saying, this is where you're at. This is like the state of your industry. This is what we're going to do. We implement some forms of story branding. So we believe in like walking through people and saying that we're the appropriate guide, for their problem. And so the proposal, coupled with the sales really like drove home like why, we're the right partner for them. And especially when we were pitching, going up against other people, it was just like, clearly this is a different thing, I'm getting involved with. It's not just a scope of work and it's just kind of listening or quantifying it. It's like telling a story about how, it's going to have an impact on them and why this is, the right decision.
Yeah, education in the sales process and on the proposal is so key because because everybody else, like you were saying, Ryan, is like everyone else is going to document what they're going to do. But like, I like how you said, hey, I put some stories in there, or it's like a storytelling and it's walking the story of what we're going to do, where they're at, what they'll actually become, rather than SEO, 8,000 a month. Like, okay, like it gives like, especially if you had a couple meetings with that prospect and they're like, yeah, okay, good. And then they get the proposal, it could literally backfire on you. And I'm sure you probably reviewed it with them, I presume.
Yeah, that was one thing that we took, directly from what you told us to do, is never send a proposal unless you're on a Zoom call with them. Like, we were first doing the phone calls, but now it's like, we do not, like, no matter what. And we've made the exception, and it just never works out. It's
Oh, it
like,
always blows up.
it always blows up. And then you're like, man, this is like, this person just doesn't have a lot of time, but like right away, like that person's going to be a nightmare if they don't respect your time. It's like, and they're not even a client yet. So I think getting somebody on the Zoom and walking through exactly what we're going to be doing. And it's almost like information overload, where it's like a lot of the competitors, like we've seen our people's proposals and pitches, like it's a Word document sometimes. So we're using like a nice piece of software. Better Proposals is what we use. And so we just, walk through every single, like, hey, this is like our 30, 60, 90-day plans. We put it together. This is like what's going to happen in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So really outlining like all, and then showing the team. I think that's really important too. So one pivotal thing that we've done is brought a big in-house team. Once again, it's like, it cuts down on the margins, but we have a ton of content writers, and we were outsourcing that at one point, and it's a lot of work to get that team going, but you have so much more control. And it's also a thing we use in the pitch is like, hey, people work for us in house. Like, they work with law firms all day. So it's not like it's a new client you're working with. So that's something else that really helped, is having control over the employees, and then implementing systems to make sure that those employees are happy. It's like, such as like EOS, and Ryan's like our EOS expert, so we can talk on that.
Very cool.
That was a
Awesome.
good segue.
Well, good. We'll continue with the EOS. Is this the other pivotal point?
Yeah, for sure.
I suppose it is. Yeah. Number 3. So this is discussed even back in the day in Atlanta. There were people that were starting to ramp up with EOS, and now it's like probably just everybody at this point. You can't go anywhere without hearing about
almost everybody in the mastermind has gone through EOS, and takes a while though to implement, but it's really good.
And that's absolutely true. I remember it was May of 2019. I've said it so many times, it's like it was yesterday, but that's when we started rolling it out. And anyone listening that's in it that doesn't see the value yet, I would definitely encourage them to keep diving into it and really push it to 100. That's not really supposed to be like cherry picked. Like, I know that we rolled it out and we're like, okay, we're gonna have an org, visualize org chart. We're gonna do rocks. We're gonna do maybe like some meetings, but we didn't do the 90-minute meeting, and then we didn't do the people analyzer, and we didn't do some other components, and it doesn't really like fire off until you really start getting closer to 100%. So it's always had its benefits over time, but it wasn't until I don't want to segue to number 4 already. Very good, that happened so quickly. But hiring someone internally to do operations that can really dedicate more time. There are like EOS implementers out there that can certainly guide businesses, agencies, whoever. So really like owning that whole process, and not just picking what you want to do, has made a difference. So
yeah, I see a lot of agencies that they implement it, and if they're the ones in charge of implementing it and keeping them on track, it's always really hard, because owners, man, we're distracted, and we're not the best implementers. I mean, there's not many owners that are good implementers, just to be honest, right? There are a few, and I've seen a few, but most of us are all kind of visionaries. We'll have the ideas, and then the implementers are dream squashers, I call them, which is good. They have to kind of reel us back into reality and going, no, Jason, like, you want to put a office on the moon? Like, it's just not ready yet. Dream squashers. So go into the next one, which I think you already hinted to a little bit, of bringing operations.
Yeah. So once you have that operations person, there's a lot of things that coincide with another one of your recommendations that you had for us was time tracking, and making sure that all of our employees are tracking their time. And it's obvious for consultants to do this, but from an employee standpoint, I always knew as an employee, like, I always felt that'd be micromanaging. Like, I would never want someone to look over my shoulder and track our time. But what we do is we tell our employees, like, hey, this isn't like Big Brother watching over you. This is so we can understand like how we're billing our clients. And that's one thing that's really helped with profitability, and actually knowing what we should be charging our clients. And our operations manager is the person that kind of oversees this. So we'll know and we'll say, oh man, like we have our meetings every week, or we have like our level 10 like EOS meetings, and we'll go through our clients and say, hey, this client's over capacity. What are we going to do here? Are we going to like, and then the sales team comes in and says, okay, we need to upsell them, or hey, we need to, change our strategy here, or hey, we need to take the hit for 3 months because they need extra help. But there's that conversation that you would never have if you didn't have that data. And we're able to forecast for a lot of things like, oh, we're going to need a new SEO soon. We're going to need a new AM soon. It's all based off of capacity. So that's one thing that's like, it's a lot of work. And at first it sounds like you're being very intrusive with your employees. I thought at least, but it's been a game changer in understanding your business. And there's been a lot of times where when we first finally got everything together and kind of reeled everything in, it was like, oh my gosh, we're losing so much money on this client when you thought, this is a great client, they're paying a lot of money. But at the end of the day, it's like, we're paying to work for these people. And so we did, what you suggest, and we just sent the email. It's like, hey, we're raising your prices. And I think we did that for most of our clients, maybe like 2 years ago, Ryan. And I think we only lost like one client when we did that.
Isn't it scary though, when you get the data back and you go, holy cow, I thought this was a really good client and we're actually paying them to work for them. It's kind of almost like that feeling of like you're at that roller coaster and you're about to go down and then you start going down. Like, I remember that's the feeling I had, because when we started doing that, we were losing money on 60% of our engagements, 60%. And it was just a slap in the face. And I was like, and I felt more disappointed in myself because I didn't catch it. But then once we caught it, we're like, this is amazing.
You could make all the excuses you want to, where it's like, hey, my AMs aren't busy anyways, it's fine. But at the end of the day, like, you don't want to overwork your people. If they're, and you want to know, like, hey, like, we have conversations with our salespeople, like, we need to push right now. So like, what are we going to do? Are we going to do this campaign where we, go after old proposals? Are we going to do like through some direct mail? What are we going to do to get some new clients over the next 2 months? So without that data, you're kind of just shooting in the dark and hoping that something sticks.
Yeah, that's awesome. What, when you were bringing in the operations person, what did you look for and where did you find them?
That's a great question, because it was a completely new hire. It was someone that for the first time they would be doing no client facing. Mark was basically their client. And so, yeah, I think Jason and I don't know if we did a lot of research or asking people ahead of time, like what some of his qualities were. But we kind of were going like a office manager route. So I think we were like finding a lot of administrative people that were like highly organized and were kind of like leading the charge with some things that were going on really just like internally. So we interviewed people that we thought were good, that were like, oh, I love baking cupcakes for my employees. And we're like, that sounds good. And then with other people that were saying like, I organize businesses coming out of town to invest money in this city. And I'm like a local like representative. And so it was like such a gamut when it came to these people. But ultimately, well, the cupcakes were out of the question because it was remote by that point. So can't.
Oh, you don't like
shipping
cupcakes?
Well, they're good and they ship easily, but there would have been people just all over the country at that point. So it really was a lot like a high level like organization, and I think that someone that says processes or something along that line, with that you kind of pulling that kind of phrasing out of them, just naturally saying systems and a process and organization naturally over the course of a conversation multiple times. It's kind of a good route. That's some of the qualities to be looking for. But it was interesting. They were never working for an agency. They were working for startups and local governments.
Yeah. And I always tell people, when you bring in someone from the operations, it's a lot of times better to bring them in from non-agency, but they were doing operations and like building systems and all of that stuff that we're not elsewhere. And then they can bring that experience. It's kind of like with with Darby, our agency scale specialist, right? It's like he had no experience in the agency, but I could teach him the systems that we had in order to diagnose where an agency is and what they actually need to do. Like, he was basically like running a flooring company before, coming to us. And now he's amazing. And he, you know, he could probably run everything without me.
Yeah,
Is there anything else outside of, like, I think we went over four things. Is there a fifth one?
there's probably like 50. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think, Ryan?
I mean, I think all these things are definitely major. One of the bigger things that we're seeing now, to like bring it up to maybe present day, and I don't want to say US for everything, but with the team that's growing, and the backgrounds of people becoming more and more diverse. So not everyone in SEO like did SEO for a decade before they showed competencies elsewhere, that bring interesting things to the table. So what we're seeing now is opportunity for people to have more ownership over internal and external projects. So I think one great thing now is, I know there's a big component of EOS, like our rocks, and really letting teams kind of collaborate on them, and do things that we're starting to see really truly haven't thought of, or weren't ever going to think of. Like the content team just launched like an internal newsletter to keep everyone like up to date with some of the cool things happening with their employees I wouldn't have known about otherwise, and like think about that whatsoever. Or SEO finding a new way to like build citations to scale that are more effective and cost less. It's like it's kind of evolving to that point where the environment is like facilitating like these group projects, I guess you could say, not like in a, you know, educational way, but like they're not things that that are frivolous and you just do it just to do it. Like there are things that are going to like last with us for a long time, and so giving people carving out time for them to do that, and then also like supporting it, and then giving guidance, and then letting them collaborate, it's been pretty cool. And so we're seeing a lot of that over the past few months, so that's a more recent one. I think that's going to pay off over time.
Well, when you have a direction of where you're going and you communicate that to your team, that gives them the power in order to, like, think of like you're going to a toll booth. Like before, it was probably every decision's flowing through you. But now when you give them the direction and the freedom, that's the other part. You can give them direction, but if you still have a, you know, a rope around their neck or a leash and you're constantly like tightening it, you know, they're not going to make any decisions. But when you give them the freedom to make decisions, they'll come back with things that you would never have thought of. And you're like, holy cow. And you guys are probably getting pretty close to a point where you're like, oh shit, man, the agent, you remember when I was telling you a couple of years ago, I was like, you get to a point where you'll go into a meeting and they'll be like, no, I'm good. And then you go into another meeting, no, I'm good. And then you'll talk to each other and be like, shit, man, the agency doesn't need us. You guys get to that point yet?
It definitely happens. Like I'm trying to rack my brain like which one specifically, but like it certainly does. I think that it's still good to have like kind of an environment where you're not gonna like force it or just have meetings for, no one is gonna have meetings for the sake of having meetings. There's nothing, you know, probably worse than that.
Some clients do,
But like
some clients.
yeah, well, we try to avoid that, and I think we've been pretty good about that. But you just having a very collaborative and open and trying to like you know, growth centric kind of environment that, yeah, hopefully it's not that they hopefully they still want like the input, you know, or like in groups, but only
Oh, they definitely need your guys' input. It's your
yeah,
roles have changed. That's kind
sure,
of what,
sure.
like I always tell people, is your role of running a project is done. Your role of selling an engagement is done. The role of going over a creative process is done. You have to lead the company. You have to make better leaders, right? Like your main job is being the face of the organization, like building better leaders within the company, figuring out new directions for where it's going. Like you were saying, you know, the franchise, which I love that model, or I love that niche. So many opportunities there. So, you know, it's always, it took me about 3 weeks to get over the slump of the agency doesn't need me, and then going, oh no, it does need me still, but new things.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to say is like, yeah, getting past like do I need approval for this piece of content or like this 30, 60, 90 day plan or like the report? Like, yeah, moving on from that happens and everyone can let go of that. But always being able to collaborate on like the big picture, like, we want to have a new editor for the content team because we think it's going to reduce, mistakes by X. Like, you still want to collaborate on like the big picture things like long term, but yeah, the day to day, the tasks kind of stuff. Yeah, it's good to move away from that and let them own it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely good. Well, awesome. Well, this has been amazing, guys. Is there anything I didn't ask you both that you think would benefit the audience?
So I always listen to podcasts because you're always trying to find out like what's next and the stuff you're not reading about yet. So I'll just share briefly a quick story. So we've been trying to find an SEO for over a year, hired outside recruiters. We're thinking our company's awesome because we're all remote. So we decided, hey, like Ryan's in North Carolina, maybe we should just open like a small, like find a little spot, like a WeWork type place. And those places are desperate right now. I think we're paying like $1,500 a month now for a spot for like how much is it?
Half
See?
that 850.
Yeah. So it's like for like 4 or 5 desks. Anyways, we're like, let's just try to find something locally. So I'm not even kidding. Within like 2 weeks, we found 2 people that wanted to go in an office. So it's just something to keep on everybody's radar. Like if you can't find people right now that want to work remote, there's an urge and there's a need for people that want to go into the office right now. And if you have the opportunity to, for it to be somewhere where you can give that hands-on collaboration, it's even better. So it's just something to put out there.
I love that. Yeah. And I totally agree. Like some people, they don't have a good setup at their house or their apartment, or they want to get away from their annoying significant other. I don't know. Or they just want to get out, and be around people since we've been kind of cooped up. So I love that. Thanks for sharing. What's the agency website people can go and check you guys out?
Sure. It's marketmymarket.com.
So easy to remember. So everyone go check out their website, and thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you guys like this episode and you want to be around other amazing agency owners and just be able to see things you might not be able to see and see the strategies that might be able to take you to the next level, I'd love to invite all of you to go to digitalagencyelite.com. This is our exclusive mastermind. And the cool thing that's really been happening, we've been doing this mastermind for 5 years, and we've had a lot of members that are basically in the mastermind for around 2 to 3 years, and they'll leave for a little while to go implement and they'll come back. And that's really pretty cool. And Ryan and Chase are one of the victims that we dragged back. So go to digitalagencyelite.com, and until next time, have a swank day.